The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of beings from across known space filled the massive chamber. Some had wings, others had tentacles, and many looked like nothing humans had ever imagined. The air buzzed with sounds from hundreds of different languages being translated by machines. Captain Lee Hanna stood near the back with the other human observers. She was small compared to most aliens in the room. At 5 feet 4 inches, she barely reached the knees of some species. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight military style. Her dark eyes watched everything with careful attention. The humans were new to this gathering. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 3 years ago. Most alien species still saw them as children who had barely learned to travel between stars. The humans were allowed to watch the important meetings, but they could not vote on anything. Yet today was special. Today was the announcement of the combat trials. Ambassador Park Min-ho sat in the human section, wearing his best diplomatic uniform. He was a patient man who had spent years learning alien customs. Next to him, Dr. Kim Woo-jin scribbled notes about the different species around them. The scientist was fascinated by every new form of life he saw. At the center of the hall stood a massive platform. On it sat representatives from the most powerful empires in the galaxy. The Vorthak delegation took up the largest space. They looked like giant praying mantises crossed with armored tanks. Their leader, High Warlord Thexmore, was 12 feet tall with 4 arms. His chitinous shell gleamed under the lights like polished black metal. Citizens of the galaxy. Thexmore's voice boomed through the translation systems. Another year has passed. Another year of Vorthak victory in the sacred combat trials. Cheers erupted from the Vorthak section. Other species clapped politely or made their own versions of approval sounds. The humans sat quietly, still learning about this tradition. For 47 years, our champion Grixtar the Bone Render has defended our honor. No warrior from any world has been able to defeat him. This grants our empire the right to expand into 3 more star systems this year. Hana frowned. Those star systems had human colonies. 60 million people lived there, farming and building new lives. If the Vorthak won again, those people would become slaves or worse. The combat trials were an ancient tradition. Instead of massive space wars that could destroy entire worlds, disputes were settled by single combat. Each species could send 1 warrior to fight in an arena. The winner's people got whatever they were fighting for. The loser's warrior usually died. Dr. Kim Woo-jin leaned over to whisper to Ambassador Park. The Vorthak champion has never lost. Their biology makes them perfect killing machines. 4 arms, natural armor, incredible strength. Most opponents die in the first 30 seconds. Ambassador Park nodded grimly. He had been trying to negotiate with the Vorthak for months. They refused all offers. They wanted those human colonies, and they were confident their champion could take them. Are there any challenges this year? Thexmore asked, looking around the hall with amusement. His compound eyes glittered like black jewels. Several smaller species shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew challenging the Vorthak champion was suicide. The arena floor was stained with the blood of hundreds of warriors who had tried and failed. The Zelani hegemony challenges for the mining rights to the Kepler system, announced a being that looked like a walking tree with crystals growing from its bark. The Synthetic Alliance requests combat for citizenship rights in the Outer Rim, declared a robot whose voice sounded like music. More challenges came from across the galaxy. Trade routes, mining rights, territorial disputes, all would be settled by combat. All would likely end in death for the challengers. Thexmore nodded at each challenge. Grixtar will be happy to face these warriors. As always, the trials will be held on the sacred asteroid of Kethmolar. Traditional weapons only. Single combat to the death. Ambassador Park stood up slowly. The translator system picked up his voice and carried it across the vast hall. The Terran Federation requests the right to participate in the combat trials. The hall fell silent. Then laughter began. It started with the Vorthak delegation and spread throughout the chamber. Some species made chittering sounds. Others produced harmonic drones. All were laughing at the humans. You jest, Thexmore said, when the laughter died down. Humans are barely past their first space flights. You have no warriors worthy of the arena. We have the same right as any species to participate, Ambassador Park replied calmly. Very well. Thexmore's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile. What do you wish to challenge for? The 3 star systems you plan to claim this year, the ones with human colonies. The laughter started again, louder this time. Thexmore raised one clawed hand for silence. Those systems contain 60 million of your people. You would risk their lives on a single combat? We would risk one life to save 60 million, Ambassador Park said. And who would be your champion? Some cybernetic soldier? A genetically enhanced super warrior? Captain Hana stood up from her seat. Her movement was smooth and confident. She walked down the aisle between the alien delegates, her boots clicking on the metal floor. When she reached the human section, she looked up at Thexmore. I will represent humanity, she said simply. The laughter died again. This time the silence was different. It was shocked. Thexmore stared down at the small human woman. She looked impossibly fragile compared to his armored bulk. You? A female barely larger than a Vorthak child? Yes. Do you understand what you are volunteering for? Grixtar has killed representatives from species far stronger than humans. He has torn apart Titan-class combat androids with his bare hands. He has crushed the bones of warriors twice your size. Hana never broke eye contact. I understand. Then you understand you will die, horribly, in front of representatives from every civilized world. That remains to be seen. Thexmore leaned forward, his massive head coming closer to her level. I will offer your species mercy. Surrender those 3 systems now. Give them to us freely and we will grant your colonists quick deaths instead of slavery. This is more kindness than we have ever shown another species. Thank you for the offer, Hana said politely. But we decline. The warlord's eyes narrowed. So be it. Your death will serve as an excellent lesson to other upstart species who think they can challenge the natural order. Perhaps, Hana agreed. Or perhaps some will learn a different lesson entirely. She turned and walked back to her seat, ignoring the stares and whispers from thousands of alien observers. Ambassador Park grabbed her arm as she sat down. Hana, what are you doing? This is madness. Is it? She asked quietly. 60 million people, Minho. That's more than the population of South Korea. Are their lives worth less than mine? But you can't win, it's impossible. The Vorthak are biological killing machines. Everything is impossible until someone does it. She looked around at the alien faces staring at them. Besides, I think our new friends are about to learn something important about humans. What's that? We don't like being underestimated. Dr. Kim Woojin leaned over. Hana, I've been studying Vorthak biology for months. Their champion is essentially a living weapon. Natural armor, redundant organs, muscles, that work 3 times more efficiently than human muscles. How can you possibly fight something like that? Hana smiled for the first time since entering the hall. Doctor, you're thinking like a scientist. Sometimes the answer isn't in the data. Then where is it? In knowing that every enemy, no matter how strong, has weaknesses. You just have to be smart enough to find them. Thexmore's voice boomed across the hall again. The challenges are accepted. The combat trials will begin in 1 standard week. Prepare your champions and prepare for their deaths. As the assembly began to break up, alien representatives hurried to place bets on the upcoming fights. The odds against the human champion were already being calculated. Most bookmakers wouldn't even take bets on her survival past the first minute. But in the human section, Captain Lee Hana sat quietly, her mind already working on a problem that everyone else thought was impossible to solve. She had 1 week to prepare for a fight that no human had ever faced before. 1 week to prove that sometimes the smallest warrior could carry the biggest surprise. The asteroid Kethmolar had been carved into an arena thousands of years ago. It floated in the darkness between stars, a monument to violence and death. The Vorthak had claimed it as their sacred ground after winning the combat trials for 3 centuries straight. Captain Lee Hana's transport ship approached the asteroid slowly. Through the viewport, she could see the massive structure. The entire rock had been hollowed out and shaped into a bowl. Ancient weapons were carved into its outer surface, telling the story of every champion who had died there. "It's bigger than I expected," said Dr. Kim Woo-jin, pressing his face against the window. The scientist had insisted on coming along to study their enemy up close. "The arena itself is 300 meters across," said Colonel Jang Hyun-woo, reading from his datapad. He was Hana's commanding officer and had tried to talk her out of this mission for the entire week of travel. "The walls are covered with acid-etched names. Every warrior who has died in combat trials for the past 1,000 years. Hana nodded but said nothing. She had spent the journey in meditation and training. The ship's small gym had been converted into a practice space where she worked with her weapons for hours each day. The crew had grown used to the rhythmic sounds of her training echoing through the corridors. "Tell me about their champion again," she said to Dr. Kim. The scientist pulled up a holographic display. The image of Grixtar the Bone Render appeared in the air between them. He was massive even for a Vorthak, 4 meters tall with chitinous armor that looked like it could stop laser fire. His 4 arms were each as thick as a human torso. "Grixtar has been champion for 47 years, Dr. Kim explained. His species evolved on a death world where everything tried to kill everything else. Their bones are denser than steel. Their muscles can exert force that would crush a human instantly. They have redundant organ systems, so even serious injuries won't stop them." "What about weaknesses?" Colonel Jang asked. "That's the problem. I can't find any obvious ones. Their nervous system is distributed throughout their body, so there's no single point of failure. Their exoskeleton protects all their vital organs. They're essentially perfect killing machines." Hana studied the image carefully. "What weapons does he use?" "Traditional Vorthak weapons passed down through his bloodline. Bone blades grown from the skeletons of their homeworld's apex predators. The blades can cut through starship hull plating. He also carries war clubs studded with the teeth of his previous opponents." "Charming," Colonel Jang muttered. "The teeth aren't just trophies," Dr. Kim continued. "They're treated with Vorthak battle toxins. Even a small cut can cause paralysis or death in most species." Their ship docked at one of the asteroid's many landing bays. Hana gathered her gear and prepared to disembark. She wore standard military fatigues with no visible weapons. Her black hair was braided back in a traditional Korean style. "Hana," Colonel Jang grabbed her arm as they reached the airlock. "You don't have to do this. We could find another way." 60 million people are counting on me, sir. There is no other way." "But you're just one person. How can you possibly win?" She smiled at him, the same calm smile she had worn since volunteering for this mission. "Have you ever heard of David and Goliath, Colonel? That's a myth." "Maybe. But sometimes myths become reality when people need them to." The delegation was met by Vorthak guards at the docking bay. The aliens towered over the humans, their chitinous shells gleaming under artificial lights. They escorted the group through corridors carved from solid rock, past chambers filled with alien spectators from across the galaxy. The arena itself took Hana's breath away. It was vast beyond imagination, with seating for millions of beings. The floor was stained dark with the blood of countless warriors. In the center was a circular pit where the actual combat would take place. Impressive, is it not? High Warlord Thexmore appeared behind them, his massive form casting shadows over the human delegation. "Every great warrior in galactic history has either triumphed here or died here. There is no middle ground." "It's very grand," Hana replied, politely. "Your opponent is preparing in the champion's chambers. Would you like to see him before the combat begins?" "If it's permitted." Thexmore led them down another corridor to a massive chamber carved from black stone. Inside, Grixtar the Bone Render was practicing with his weapons. Each swing of his bone blades cut deep grooves in solid rock targets. His war clubs shattered stone formations that had been set up for his training. He was even more terrifying in person than in the recordings. His chitinous armor was covered with scars from decades of combat. His compound eyes reflected light like black mirrors. When he moved, The floor vibrated under his weight. "Magnificent, is he not?" Thexmore said proudly. 47 years of victories, hundreds of dead opponents. He has never even been seriously injured in combat. Grixtar noticed the human delegation watching him. He turned toward them slowly, his weapon still in his hands. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding stone. "So this is the human who wishes to die today." The translation system made his words clear, but there was something in his tone that needed no translation. Pure, confident contempt. "I am honored to face such a renowned warrior," Hana replied formally, bowing slightly. Grixtar's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Honor? There will be no honor in your death, little creature. Only pain and then darkness." "Perhaps, but the combat has not begun yet." "True. Tell me, small one, what weapons will you bring to our dance of death?" "Traditional weapons from my world as the rules require." "And what might those be?" "Energy weapons, explosive projectiles, some form of advanced technology." "Nothing so complicated. Simple tools that my people have used for thousands of years." Grixtar leaned forward, studying her with his alien eyes. "You intrigue me, human. Most opponents come to me with their most advanced weapons, their finest armor, their greatest technological advantages. Yet you speak of simple tools. Sometimes simple is better. We shall see. I look forward to discovering what simple tools a species barely capable of spaceflight considers worthy of this arena." Thexmore gestured for the humans to follow him. "Come, we will show you to your preparation chambers. You have 4 hours before the combat begins." As they walked away, Hana could hear Grixtar resuming his practice. The sound of his weapons destroying stone targets echoed through the corridors like thunder. "He's fast," Colonel Jang whispered. "Faster than something. That size should be able to move." "And strong," Dr. Kim added. "Those practice targets were made of compressed stone harder than concrete. He's cutting through them like paper." "I noticed," Hana said calmly. "Aren't you worried?" Colonel Jang asked. "Worried? Yes. Terrified? Absolutely. But also curious." "Curious? About what?" "About whether he's as good as everyone thinks he is, or whether 47 years of easy victories have made him lazy." The human preparation chamber was small compared to Grixtar's training space. It contained basic exercise equipment and a small meditation area. Hana dismissed her escorts and asked to be left alone. She spent the first hour in meditation, sitting in the traditional lotus position her grandfather had taught her as a child. Her breathing became slow and regular. Her heartbeat steadied. Fear was natural, but it could not be allowed to control her actions. In the second hour, she practiced her forms, slow, flowing movements that looked more like dancing than combat training. Each motion was precise, economical, deadly. She had been learning these techniques since childhood, but had perfected them under the guidance of Master Choi Sung-hoon in preparation for this fight. The third hour was spent with her weapons. She unpacked them carefully from their protective case. They were simple things, elegant in their simplicity. 2 short sticks connected by a chain. Nunchucks, though that was not what her people called them. She had named them sangjol, after the traditional Korean weapon her ancestors had used. But these were not made of wood. The sticks were crafted from compressed carbon fiber, stronger than steel but light as bamboo. The chain connecting them was molecularly aligned titanium, thin as thread but able to support tremendous force. In the fourth hour, she prepared her mind for what was to come. She thought about the 60 million people depending on her. She thought about her grandfather, who had taught her that every problem had a solution if you were wise enough to see it. She thought about Master Choi's final lesson before she left Earth. "Remember," the old man had said, "the greatest weapon is not the one in your hands. It is the one your enemy never sees coming." A chime sounded in her chamber. It was time. Hana attached the sangjol to her belt, hidden under her jacket where they could not be seen. She walked to the chamber door and paused for a moment, her hand on the control panel. Somewhere in this asteroid, an alien champion waited for her with weapons that had never tasted defeat. Somewhere beyond the stars, 60 million humans prayed for a miracle. She opened the door and stepped into the corridor, ready to discover whether miracles were something you waited for or something you made happen yourself. The arena filled with beings from every corner of the galaxy. Thousands of species had sent representatives to witness what many expected to be the shortest combat trial in history. The betting pools had closed hours ago, with odds running 50,000 to 1 against the human champion. High above the arena floor in the most prestigious viewing boxes, the greatest powers in the galaxy took their seats. The Vorthak delegation occupied the largest section, their chitinous forms gleaming under the harsh lights. Other warrior races filled the surrounding areas, the crystal beings of the Zilani hegemony, the machine consciousness of the synthetic alliance, the hive minds of the insectoid collective. In a small section near the back, the human delegation sat quietly. Ambassador Park Minho wore his dress uniform, every metal polished to perfection. Dr. Kim Woo-jin clutched his recording devices, determined to document whatever was about to happen. Colonel Jang Hyun-woo stared at the arena floor with the expression of a man watching his daughter walk into hell. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all classifications, the arena announcer's voice boomed across the vast space in dozens of languages. Welcome to the 347th Annual Combat Trials of Keth Moeller. The crowd roared, its approval in sounds that ranged from musical tones to grinding static. The noise was overwhelming, a symphony of alien voices that had no human equivalent. Today we witnessed challenges from 17 different species for territorial rights, trade agreements, and colonial disputes across 43 star systems. All will be settled by single combat according to the ancient laws. Holographic displays showed the betting odds for each fight. Most were relatively close, with champions who had earned their positions through years of proven combat. At the bottom of the list, almost as an afterthought, was listed the challenge that had become the day's entertainment. Human Terran Federation versus Vorthak Empire. Challenger, Captain Lee Hanna. Champion, Grixtar the Bone Render. Prize, colonial rights to 3 star systems containing 60 million human civilians. The crowd's reaction was immediate and universal. Laughter. Not the polite amusement of a joke, but the cruel laughter of spectators anticipating a massacre. The human champion is expected to survive approximately 30 seconds, the announcer continued. This matches the record for shortest combat trial, set 47 years ago when Grixtar first claimed his title. In the human section, Dr. Kim leaned over to whisper to Ambassador Park. I've been running calculations all week. Even if Hana were 3 times faster and twice as strong as humanly possible, the physics don't work. Grixtar's advantages are just too overwhelming. Then why did she volunteer? Colonel Jang asked quietly. Because she's insane, Dr. Kim replied. Or she knows something we don't. The arena floor began to shift and change. Ancient mechanisms built into the asteroid rotated sections of the floor, revealing the combat pit in the center. It was a perfect circle, 300 meters across, with walls 20 meters high. The floor was stained dark with the blood of centuries. Presenting first the challenger from the Terran Federation. A door opened on the eastern side of the arena. Captain Lee Hanna walked out slowly, her steps echoing in the sudden silence. She looked impossibly small in the vast space, like a child who had wandered into a giant's hall. She wore her standard military uniform with no visible modifications. No armor covered her body. No weapons were apparent on her person. To the assembled aliens, she appeared to be committing elaborate suicide. The crowd's laughter resumed, louder now. Someone in the Vorthak section made a comment about humans being too stupid to understand basic survival instincts. The translation systems picked it up and broadcast it across the arena, causing fresh waves of amusement. Hana reached the center of the arena and stopped. She stood perfectly still, her arms at her sides, her breathing slow and controlled. Her dark eyes swept the crowd once, taking in the thousands of alien faces staring down at her with mixtures of pity, amusement, and anticipation. And now, presenting, the champion of champions, the Bone Render himself, 47 years undefeated Grixtar. The western door exploded outward as the Vorthak champion burst through. He was even more impressive in the arena than he had been in his preparation chamber. 4 meters of living weapon, his chitinous armor reflecting the lights like polished obsidian. His forearms carried the weapons of his ancestors, bone blades that gleamed with deadly sharpness, war clubs studded with the teeth of his victims. The crowd erupted in genuine cheers now. This was their champion, the warrior who had brought glory to the combat trials for nearly half a century. His battle cry shook dust from the ancient walls and sent vibrations through the floor that could be felt in the highest viewing boxes. Grixtar strode to the center of the arena like a conquering god. When he reached the human champion, he towered over her like a mountain over a pebble. His compound eyes studied her with the detached interest of a predator examining its next meal. "So small," he rumbled, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's acoustic systems. "I have killed insects larger than you, little human." Hana looked up at him calmly. "Size isn't everything." "No, but it helps." His mandibles clicked in. Amusement. "Where are your weapons, small one? Have you forgotten to bring them?" "I have what I need." "Truly?" "I see no blade, no club, no projectile weapon of any kind. Do you plan to defeat me with harsh words?" "Something like that." Grixtar's laugh sounded like grinding stone. "You amuse me, human. I will try to make your death quick as a reward for your courage." "That's very kind of you." The arena announcer's voice cut through their conversation. "Champions, take your positions for combat. Traditional weapons only. Single combat to the death. No quarter asked, none given." Grixtar stepped back and raised his weapons. The bone blades caught the light and gleamed with an inner fire. The war clubs were covered in old stains that told stories of previous victories. Hana bowed formally to her opponent, a gesture that drew confused murmurs from the alien crowd. Then she reached behind her back and withdrew two objects that had been hidden beneath her jacket. The arena fell silent. In her hands she held what appeared to be two simple sticks connected by a short chain. They were beautiful in their simplicity. Dark wood that seemed to absorb light, connected by links of metal that looked like silver thread. "Sangjol," she said quietly, the word carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Several beings in the crowd gasped in recognition. The weapon was simple enough that any species could understand its basic function, but elegant enough that experienced warriors could appreciate its potential. "Nunchucks," Dr. Kim whispered in the human section. "She's fighting a 4-meter killing machine with nunchucks?" "Not nunchucks," Colonel Jang corrected. "Those are sangjol, traditional Korean weapons. But what good can they possibly do against something like Grixtar?" Ambassador Park said nothing, but his eyes never left the small figure in the center of the arena. Something in Hana's posture had changed when she drew her weapons. She stood differently now, balanced in a way that suggested coiled springs ready to release. "Begin combat," the announcer declared. The crowd held its breath. Grixtar charged with the confidence of 47 victories. His bone blades swept toward the human in arcs designed to cut her in half. His war clubs followed in a pattern that would crush anything that survived the initial strikes. Hana moved. She didn't run or dodge in any direction the crowd expected. Instead, she flowed like water around Grixtar's attacks, her body bending and twisting in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The sangjol in her hands spun in precise patterns, deflecting strikes that should have been undodgeable. The first exchange lasted 3 seconds. When it ended, Grixtar stood in the center of the arena, his weapon still raised, confusion replacing confidence on his alien features. The human champion stood 5 meters away, completely unharmed, her weapon spinning slowly in her hands. "Impossible," someone whispered in the crowd. The whisper spread and grew until it became a murmur that filled the entire arena. The human had not only survived Grixtar's opening attack, she had made it look easy. Grixtar roared in frustration and charged, again. This time his movements were faster, more desperate. He had never faced an opponent who had survived his first assault. His weapons moved in blurs of death, seeking to end this impossible fight. Again, Hana flowed around his attacks like smoke, but this time, her weapons struck back. The sangjol found gaps in his chitinous armor that shouldn't have existed, striking with surgical precision at joints and nerve clusters. Grixtar stumbled, his left primary arm going suddenly numb. The bone blade clattered to the arena floor. The crowd sat in stunned silence. In 47 years of combat, their champion had never dropped a weapon, had never shown weakness, had never been touched by an opponent's strike. How? Grixtar demanded, staring at his useless arm. Pressure points, Hana replied simply. Every living thing has them. You just have to know where to look. She began to move again, not retreating but advancing. Her sangjal spun in patterns that mesmerized even as they destroyed. Each strike found another nerve cluster, another weakness in the Vorthak's biological armor. For the first time in his life, Grixtar the Bone Render began to understand what it felt like to be prey. 10 minutes into the combat, the impossible had become reality. Grixtar the Bone Render, champion for 47 years, was losing. His left primary arm hung useless at his side, nerves severed by precise strikes from the human spinning weapons. His secondary arms trembled with partial paralysis. One of his war clubs lay forgotten on the arena floor, dropped when his grip failed. The crowd watched in absolute silence. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Champions were supposed to dominate. Battles were supposed to end quickly. The natural order of the galaxy was being turned upside down by a small human woman with simple wooden sticks. This cannot be happening. High Warlord, Thexmore muttered from his viewing box. His compound eyes were fixed on the arena floor where his champion struggled against an opponent who should have been dead within seconds. But it is happening, replied Ambassador Park Minho, unable to keep the satisfaction out of his voice. Your champion is learning that humans fight differently than other species. How is she doing this? Those weapons are primitive. Our champion has faced energy weapons, molecular blades, plasma cannons. How can simple sticks defeat him? Dr. Kim. Wu Jin leaned forward in his seat, his scientific mind racing to understand what he was witnessing. She's not trying to overpower him. Look at her movements. Every strike targets a specific point on his anatomy. She's treating his body like a machine that can be systematically shut down. In the arena, Hana continued her deadly dance. Her sangjal moved in flowing patterns that seemed almost artistic. Each strike was precisely calculated, finding nerve clusters that millions of years of Vorthak evolution had tried to hide. She had spent months studying Dr. Kim's biological data on the Vorthak species. Every muscle fiber, every nerve pathway, every weakness in their seemingly perfect design. What appeared to be an unstoppable killing machine was actually a complex biological system with very specific vulnerabilities. Grixtar swung his remaining functional weapon in a desperate arc. The bone blade whistled through the air with enough force to cut through starship armor. Hana ducked under it and struck upward, her left sangjal finding the cluster of nerves at the base of his skull. The champion's entire body convulsed. His remaining weapons clattered to the floor as his nervous system misfired. He staggered backward, his massive form shaking like a mountain in an earthquake. "What have you done to me?" he demanded, his voice distorted by the damage to his neural pathways. "I told you," Hana replied, never stopping her movement around him. "Pressure points. Your species has the same basic nervous system as most carbon-based life forms. You just hide it better." "Impossible. Our armor protects us from all attacks. From direct attacks, yes, but I'm not attacking your armor. I'm attacking the connections between your armor and the body underneath it," she demonstrated by striking again, this time at a point where his chitinous shell joined at the shoulder. Grixtar's right secondary arm went limp, the war club falling from nerveless fingers. The crowd began to murmur in dozens of languages. Betting pools that had been closed for hours suddenly reopened as spectators tried to understand what they were witnessing. "She's targeting the gaps in his exoskeleton," Dr. Kim explained to his human colleagues. "Every arthropod has joints where the armor pieces connect. Those joints have to be flexible to allow movement, which makes them vulnerable." "But how did she learn to exploit them so precisely?" Colonel Jang asked. "Training," Ambassador Park said simply. "While we were studying their technology and their tactics, she was studying their biology. She turned our enemy's greatest strength into his greatest weakness." Grixtar tried to charge again, but his movements were clumsy now. Half of his limbs no longer responded properly to his commands. The humans circled him like a predator, her weapons striking whenever an opening appeared. Each strike was surgical in its precision. The Sangjol found nerve clusters that controlled specific muscle groups, shutting down his motor functions piece by piece. What had begun as a fight between a giant and a mouse had become something else entirely, a systematic dismantling of a biological machine. "Stop this," Grixtar roared. "Fight me with honor. Use weapons worthy of a warrior." "These are weapons, worthy of a warrior," Hana replied calmly. "They were crafted by master artisans using techniques passed down for thousands of years. They have been blessed by masters of the martial arts and tested in combat against worthy opponents. They are sticks, children's toys. They are tools. Like any tool, their value depends on the skill of the person using them." She struck again, this time at a cluster of nerves that controlled his balance. Grixtar stumbled and fell to one knee, his massive form no longer able to support itself properly. The arena erupted in chaos. Alien spectators leaped to their feet, making sounds of disbelief and outrage. In 47 years of combat trials, no one had ever brought the Vorthak champion to his knees. "This is witchcraft," someone shouted from the Vorthak delegation. "She uses forbidden techniques. The combat must be stopped." High Warlord Thexmore rose from his seat, his forearms gesturing for silence. "The human fights within the rules. Traditional weapons only. Single combat. No outside interference. The combat continues." His voice carried no joy. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Vorthak Empire faced the possibility of defeat in the combat trials. The implications were staggering. In the arena, Hana continued her methodical destruction of her opponent's nervous system. Grixtar tried to rise, but his legs would no longer support his weight. His primary arms hung useless at his sides. His weapons lay scattered around him like fallen leaves. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "How does a creature so small defeat one so mighty?" Hana stopped her circling and stood directly in front of him. For the first time since the combat began, she was still. "You want to know the secret?" she asked. Grixtar nodded weakly. "You assumed that strength meant size, that power meant obvious weapons. That victory belonged to whoever had the most impressive armor and the sharpest blades." She held up her sangjol, the simple weapons catching the arena lights. "But my people learned long ago that the greatest strength comes from knowledge. The most powerful weapon is understanding. The finest armor is wisdom. I do not understand. You studied my species for weeks before this combat. You learned about our technology, our military capabilities, our recent entry into galactic politics. You prepared to fight the humans you expected to meet." She gestured at the crowd of alien spectators watching from above. "But none of you bothered to study our history. You didn't learn about the thousands of years we spent fighting each other before we reached the stars. You never discovered the arts of war we developed when all we had were simple weapons and our own intelligence." Grixtar's compound eyes focused on her with difficulty. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that while you were learning to depend on natural advantages, size, strength, armor, claws, my ancestors were learning to win fights against opponents who had every advantage except one." "Which advantage?" "The willingness to think." She struck one final time, her sangjol finding the master nerve cluster at the base of his skull. Grixtar's entire body went limp, his nervous system overwhelmed by the precise disruption of its command pathways. The Vorthak champion collapsed face first onto the arena floor, his massive form creating a sound like thunder. He was still breathing, still alive, but completely paralyzed. The arena fell silent. Captain Lee Hana stood over the fallen body of the greatest warrior in galactic history, her simple weapons still spinning slowly in her hands. She was breathing, hard now, sweat visible on her forehead. But she was uninjured. "Combat concluded," the arena announcer declared, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Victory to the challenger. Captain Lee Hana of the Terran Federation is victorious." The silence stretched for long moments. Then, slowly, the sound began. It started with a single being in the crowd, a crystalline creature from the Zelani hegemony, who began producing harmonic tones that indicated respect. The sound spread and grew until the entire arena was filled with the noise of thousands of alien voices, acknowledging what they had witnessed. For the first time in 347 years of combat trials, the Vorthak Empire had been defeated, and it had been done by a human with wooden sticks. 23 minutes had passed since the combat began. For 22 of those minutes, everyone in the arena had expected to watch a quick execution. Instead, they had witnessed the impossible. Grixtar the Bone Render lay motionless on the wide, stained floor of the arena. His massive chest still rose and fell with labored breathing, but the rest of his body remained completely paralyzed. The greatest warrior in galactic history had been reduced to helplessness by a human woman, barely 1/4 his size. Captain Lee Hana stood over her fallen opponent, her Sang Jol held in a ready position. She was breathing heavily now, sweat marking her forehead, but she showed no signs of serious fatigue. More importantly, she bore no visible wounds. In a combat that should have ended with her death in 30 seconds, she had emerged completely unharmed. The arena remained in stunned silence. Thousands of beings from dozens of species stared down at the scene below, their minds struggling to process what they had witnessed. The natural order of things had been overturned. The strong had fallen to the weak. The impossible had become reality. High Warlord Thexmore rose slowly from his seat in the viewing box. His forearms trembled with rage, but his voice remained controlled when he spoke. "This cannot be allowed to stand," he declared. "The human has used witchcraft, dark magic, forbidden techniques that violate the sacred nature of single combat." Ambassador Park Minho stood to respond, his diplomatic training helping him maintain his composure despite his inner excitement. "Honored Warlord, the combat was observed by representatives from 47 different species. The arena's sensors recorded every moment. Your champion was defeated by skill, knowledge, and traditional weapons. No rules were broken. No forbidden techniques were used. Those weapons are not traditional human weapons. The Sangjol have been used by Korean warriors for over 2,000 years," Ambassador Park replied calmly. "They are far more traditional than the molecular weapons or plasma cannons used by some other species in previous trials." Dr. Kim Woo-jin activated his recording devices, speaking quietly into his communicator. "Historical significance cannot be overstated. First defeat of Vorthak champion in over 3 centuries. Method of victory demonstrates sophisticated understanding of xenobiology combined with traditional martial arts techniques. Subject displayed tactical brilliance in exploiting previously unknown weakness in Vorthak nervous system architecture." In the arena below, Hana approached her fallen opponent carefully. Grixtar's compound eyes tracked her movement, but he could not speak. The precise strikes to his nervous system had left him conscious but unable to control his body. "I can see the questions in your eyes," she said quietly, kneeling beside his massive head. "You want to know how this happened? How someone like me could defeat someone like you?" She gestured at the crowd above them. "Everyone up there is asking the same question. They expected you to kill me quickly and efficiently. They bet against me surviving even 1 minute. They saw me as nothing more than an amusing way to start the day's entertainment." Grixtar managed a slight movement of his eyes that indicated he was listening. "But that was their mistake. And your mistake, too. You all looked at me and saw a small, weak creature from a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. You saw primitive weapons and assumed primitive tactics. You thought size and strength were the only things that mattered in combat." She held up her Sangjol, the weapons that had brought down the galaxy's greatest champion. "These belonged to my grandfather. He used them to fight the Japanese occupation of Korea over a century ago. Before that, they belonged to his grandfather, who used them against bandits and warlords. For 2,000 years, my ancestors refined the techniques needed to defeat opponents who were bigger, stronger, and better armed." She looked up at the Vorthak delegation in their viewing box. "Your people evolved on a world where strength meant survival. You became perfect biological weapons. Fast, strong, armored, deadly. But you never learned to fight enemies who were smarter than you. You never had to develop techniques for defeating superior opponents." Grixtar's breathing changed, slightly, and she recognized it as an attempt to speak. "My ancestors did. For thousands of years, humans have been the smallest, weakest, most fragile species on our own planet. We had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. We survived by being smarter than everything that tried to kill us." She stood and walked around, his massive form, her weapons spinning slowly in her hands. When we reached the stars and met species like yours, everyone made the same assumption. They saw our lack of natural weapons and decided we were harmless. They saw our small size and thought we were weak. They saw our short lifespans and assumed we were insignificant. The arena's speakers picked up her voice and carried it to every seat in the vast structure. But what they didn't see was that we had spent our entire evolutionary history learning to defeat opponents who had every possible advantage over us. We became experts at finding weaknesses where none seemed to exist. We developed arts of war, based on intelligence rather than strength. She stopped directly in front of Grixtar's head and looked into his compound eyes. That's why I volunteered for this combat. Not because I thought I was stronger than you, not because I had better weapons, but because I knew that your greatest strength, your perfect biological design, was also your greatest weakness. High Warlord, Thexmore's voice boomed across the arena. Enough philosophy, complete the combat, claim your trophy, and be done with this mockery. According to the ancient traditions of the combat trials, the victor was required to take proof of their victory. For the Vorthak, this had always meant claiming the skull of the defeated opponent. The walls of Kethmolar were lined with the skulls of every warrior who had fallen in these trials over the past 1,000 years. Hana nodded and reached behind her back. When her hand reappeared, it held a simple combat knife. Standard military issue. Nothing special about it except its perfect sharpness. She knelt beside Grixtar's head and placed the blade against his neck, just below the skull. The crowd leaned forward, expecting to see the traditional ending to a combat trial. Instead, Hana spoke in a voice that carried clearly throughout the arena. Grixtar the Bone Render. For 47 years, you have been the greatest warrior in known space. You have brought honor to your people and glory to these trials. You deserve better than to die as entertainment for a crowd that never truly understood your worth. She looked up at the Vorthak delegation. But the traditions must be observed. The victor claims the skull of the defeated. With a movement too quick for most of the crowd to follow, she drew the knife across Grixtar's neck. The blade was sharp enough to cut through his chitinous armor like paper, his massive head separated from his body with surgical precision. But instead of holding the trophy high in triumph, Hana did something unprecedented in the history of the combat trials. She lifted Grixtar's skull carefully in both hands and walked to the edge of the arena, directly below the Vorthak viewing section. High Warlord Thexmore stared down at her with a mixture of rage and confusion. High Warlord, she called out. I return this to you, so that Grixtar the Bone Render may be honored in death as he was in life. His skull belongs in the halls of your ancestors, not as a trophy in mine. The gesture sent shockwaves throughout the assembled crowd. In 1,000 years of combat trials, no victor had ever returned their opponent's skull to the defeated species. It was simultaneously an act of profound respect and devastating psychological warfare. Thexmore stared down at her, his alien features unreadable. Slowly, he reached down with one massive clawed hand to accept the skull of his champion. Why? He asked, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Because today we were enemies. Tomorrow we will be neighbors in the same galaxy. I would rather have neighbors who remember respect than neighbors who remember only humiliation. She stepped back and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the arena. The skull I claim as my trophy today is not made of bone. It belongs to the ignorance that assumed humanity could be easily conquered. It belongs to the arrogance that thought size and strength were all that mattered. It belongs to the blindness that could not see the difference between being weak and appearing weak. She looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at her. Let that skull serve as a reminder to anyone who might consider threatening human colonies in the future. We may not look dangerous. Our weapons may seem primitive. Our bodies may appear fragile, but we have been fighting wars since before your species learned to make fire, and we have never forgotten the lessons that survival taught us. Captain Lee Hana turned and walked toward the arena exit, her Sangjol secured once again behind her back. She had entered the arena as the representative of a species barely acknowledged by galactic civilization. She left as the warrior who had just redefined what the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of strength. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours of the combat's conclusion, every inhabited world in known space had received the reports. The Vorthak Empire, undefeated champions for over 3 centuries, had fallen to a human woman with simple wooden weapons. The implications sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. Captain Lee Hana sat in her quarters aboard the human transport ship, finally allowing herself to rest. The Sangjol hung on the wall beside her bed, back in their place of honor. Her hands still ached from the combat, and she could feel the bruises forming where Grixtar's strikes had come too close for comfort. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. "Come in," she called. Dr. Kim Woojin entered, carrying a datapad filled with readings from the arena's sensors. His scientific excitement was barely contained. "Hana, the readings from your combat are extraordinary. The precision of your strikes, the knowledge of Vorthak anatomy you displayed, it's going to revolutionize xenobiology textbooks across the galaxy." She smiled tiredly. "I'm glad it was educational." "Educational? It was miraculous. Do you realize what you've accomplished? You've changed the entire balance of power in this sector of space. 3 star systems remain under human control. 60 million colonists are safe. The Vorthak Empire has withdrawn all territorial claims against human space." That was the point. Colonel Zhang Hyunwoo appeared in the doorway. "Hana, we're receiving communications from dozens of species. Everyone wants to know how you did it. Some are offering alliances, others are requesting military advisors. A few are asking if humans are available as mercenaries." "And what are you telling them?" "That they'll have to speak with our diplomats. But honestly, I'm not sure what we should say. You've made humanity famous overnight." Ambassador Park Min-ho joined them in the small cabin. "The political ramifications are staggering. The Galactic Council is in emergency session. Half the species that were considering aggressive expansion have suddenly discovered urgent needs for peaceful negotiations." "Good," Hana said simply. "But we need to be careful. Fame can be dangerous. There will be challenges. Species that want to test themselves against the new champion. Bounty hunters seeking to make names for themselves. Political rivals trying to prove that your victory was a fluke. Let them come. But they should remember what happened to the last champion who underestimated humans." Dr. Kim pulled up a holographic display showing communication intercepts from across the galaxy. "Listen to some of these messages. The crystalline hegemony is offering trade agreements that were impossible to negotiate last week. The Synthetic Alliance wants to exchange technology. Even the hive minds are expressing interest in cultural exchanges." "Fear?" Hana asked. "Respect," Colonel Zhang corrected. "They're not afraid of us. They're impressed. You didn't just win a fight. You demonstrated something they didn't think was possible. You showed that intelligence could triumph over raw power." Ambassador Park nodded. "The way you returned Grixtar's skull to his people has been particularly noted. Many species are calling it the most honorable act they've ever witnessed in the combat trials. It was the right thing to do. He was a great warrior. He deserved better than to become a trophy." A priority communication alert chimed through the ship systems. Colonel Zhang activated the main display, revealing the face of Admiral Song Ji-hoon, commander of the Terran Defense Corps. "Captain Lee, congratulations on your victory. The entire human species owes you a debt that can never be repaid." "Thank you, sir. I was just doing my duty. Your duty has made you the most famous human in galactic history. But I'm calling with urgent news. We've received formal communications from 17 different species requesting combat trials against you." The cabin fell silent. "Sir?" Hana asked. "They're not challenging humanity's territories. They want to test their champions against you specifically. Word has spread that the combat trials have a new champion, and everyone wants to face her." "Are these mandatory?" "No. The trials are voluntary. But the requests are coming from species across the political spectrum. Some are genuine challenges for territorial disputes. Others seem to be seeking glory by defeating the champion who brought down Grixtar. Dr. Kim looked concerned. She can't fight dozens of champions, it's not physically possible. I'm not asking her to, Admiral Song replied. But we need to consider our response carefully. How we handle these challenges will determine humanity's position in galactic politics for generations. Ambassador Park stepped forward. What are the terms being offered? Varied. Some are standard territorial disputes. Others are offering significant concessions just for the opportunity to face our champion. The Merchant Alliance is offering exclusive trading rights across their entire network if we'll accept their challenge. And if we refuse? Nothing immediately. But it might be seen as weakness. The galaxy is watching to see if humanity's victory was skill or luck. Hana stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights were the human colonies she had fought to protect. Somewhere else were the worlds of species that might become allies or enemies depending on the choices made in the coming days. How long do I have to decide? She asked. The formal response deadline is 1 standard week. But Captain, you should know. Refusing all challenges might be interpreted as fear. Accepting too many might be seen as aggression. We need to find the right balance. She turned back to face the group. What does Earth Command recommend? Accept select challenges, ones that offer significant benefits to humanity with manageable risk. Use your status as champion to negotiate from a position of strength. And if I lose one of these fights? Then we're back where we started, only with the knowledge that human tactics can work against at least one species. Hana nodded slowly. Send me the details on all 17 challenges. I'll review them and make recommendations. Understood. Captain, one more thing. Master Choi Sung-hoon has requested permission to join your support team if you decide to accept additional challenges. She smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Tell him I'd be honored to have his guidance. After Admiral Song's image faded, the cabin remained quiet for several minutes. Finally, Dr. Kim broke the silence. Are you really considering fighting more aliens? I'm considering doing whatever is necessary to keep humanity safe and respected in galactic civilization. But you could be killed in any of these fights. I could have been killed today. But 60 million people would have died if I hadn't tried. Colonel Jang shook his head. This is madness. You're one person. You can't carry the entire responsibility for humanity's future on your shoulders. I'm not carrying it alone. She gestured to the 3 of them. I have the best diplomatic, scientific, and military support in human space, and I have the knowledge that what happened today proved something important. What's that? That humans don't have to be the biggest or strongest or most advanced species in the galaxy. We just have to be smart enough to find solutions that others miss. She picked up the data pad containing details of the 17 challenges and began scrolling through the information. Besides, I'm curious to see what other impossible things we can accomplish. Ambassador Park watched her reading the challenge details with the focused attention of a scholar studying ancient texts. You're actually looking forward to this, aren't you? Looking forward to more fights? No. Looking forward to the opportunity to continue changing how the galaxy sees humanity? Absolutely. She found a challenge that caught her interest. A territorial dispute with a species known for their energy-based weapons and ability to phase through solid matter. This one's interesting. The Ethereal Collective wants to contest mining rights to a system rich in rare elements. They're offering joint development rights if I can defeat their champion in single combat. Dr. Kim looked over her shoulder at the data. The ethereals are essentially living energy. How do you fight something that can become intangible at will? The same way I fought Grixtar. By learning everything about them and finding the weaknesses that everyone else missed. She closed the data pad and looked around at her colleagues. Gentlemen, I think humanity's real education in galactic politics is just beginning. Today I proved that humans can win fights that seem impossible. Tomorrow I think we should find out what else we can accomplish that the galaxy doesn't expect. Colonel Jang sighed. You're going to give us all heart attacks. Maybe. But think about this. When I walked into that arena today, everyone thought humanity was weak, primitive, and harmless. Now they know we're dangerous in ways they never imagined. She hung the sangjil back on the wall and prepared for sleep. In one day, we've gone from being ignored to being respected. I wonder what we can accomplish in a week. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that a small human woman had just begun reshaping the balance of power in their galaxy. The skull she had claimed as her trophy, the death of galactic ignorance about human capabilities, would prove to be far more valuable than any single victory. The age of humanity being underestimated had ended in an arena carved from an asteroid. The age of humans teaching the galaxy new definitions of strength had just begun.